"Security will escort you out," she said, and for a second, I thought I'd misheard her. But then two rent-a-cops, guys I'd hired myself when we expanded in '09, stepped forward like I was a threat. That's how it ends, huh? 30 years. Not even a handshake. Just a pink slip and a couple of guys who couldn't meet my eyes. I glanced at the letter again. Company letterhead, my signature removed. I'd built this business out of a rented garage with a cracked foundation and a fax machine that caught fire twice. And now, in the same boardroom I'd sketched expansion plans on the back of sandwich napkins, I was being evicted like bad furniture. "This is my family's company now," she repeated, louder this time. Her brother, now apparently head of operations, nodded behind her like a bobblehead with a law degree. My chair was already being wheeled out. Funny thing is, I didn't shout, didn't argue. I just looked her in the eye, folded the letter once, like I had 1,000 contracts before, and slipped it into my inside coat pocket. My hands didn't shake. Hers did, just barely, when I passed close enough to hear her whisper it again. "You should have retired when I told you to." Not asked, told. So I nodded. No dramatics. Just walked past the whiteboard that still had my handwriting on it from this morning's review of Q3 numbers. Profit up 11%. Expansion into 2 new regions. Client retention at an all-time high. And still, I was excess inventory. If you're listening to this and think it won't happen to you, take a breath. It will. Maybe not by your wife. Maybe not by your board. But someone you mentored, trusted, and gave everything to will one day look you in the face and decide you're obsolete. And when that day comes, keep walking. Which reminds me, if you're here, listening to this story, and you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Most of you tune in every week and forget to hit that button. But it motivates the team, keeps this going, and frankly, it helps stories like this reach the guys who need to hear them most. Anyway, I drove past our house without stopping. She'd changed the gate code last week. I didn't ask why, just made a mental note. Instead, I went north. 3 hours. No music, just tires and silence, and a single thought I kept pressing down like a loose floorboard. She doesn't even know what she triggered. She thinks she won. She thinks I'm out. And to be fair, so did I, for about 4 hours. Until I opened the briefcase. You see, when we incorporated the business back in the early days, my first lawyer was this chain-smoking lunatic named Cliff Mercer. Cliff didn't believe in clean exits. He believed in nuclear options. His words. He wrote them in red pen on the top of the first document I ever signed as a founder. "In case of betrayal, use Article 7B. Back then, I laughed. Told him it was paranoid. He said, "Kid, trust me. Every kingdom eventually forgets who built the walls." I kept the file all these years, untouched. I never thought I'd need it. But that night, in the cabin I hadn't visited in a decade, with dust thick enough to write my resignation in, I found the metal briefcase under the floorboard, right where Cliff told me to leave it. Combination lock. Same code as the day I met her. The folder inside. One sheet. Article 7B. I poured 2 fingers of Glenfiddich, lit a fire, and read it like scripture. And when I was done, I didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just took out my phone, scrolled to one contact, and hit call. He picked up on the first ring. Same gravel voice. "Alan DeWitt," he said. I only said one sentence. "It's time." He didn't ask for details. Just said, "You want it loud or quiet?" I stared at the fire. Smiled. Quiet. Very quiet. The cabin smelled like pine, mildew, and old betrayal. Same wood stove. Same rusted lanterns. Same cracked leather armchair I'd fallen asleep in during the first winter we turned a profit. I hadn't been here in over a decade. Not since she started saying things like, "That place makes you act weird," or, "You always come back from there different." She wasn't wrong. The cabin was mine before anything else was. Before the company. Before the marriage. Before the layers of polite suffocation. It was the one place she never touched, never redecorated, never renamed ours. And that made it perfect. I didn't turn on the lights. Just set the scotch bottle down on the dusty counter, found the old kerosene lamp, and lit it like muscle memory. Shadows stretched long across the wood floor. Dust motes danced like ghosts of old deals. The boxes were still where I'd left them, in the crawl space beneath the trapdoor, covered in an old tarp and labeled in thick black Sharpie. Original articles, incorporated docs, mergers and OPS, and one, taped twice, that read simply, "Cliff, do not shred." That was the one I wanted. I pried it open and pulled out the steel briefcase, cold, heavier than I remembered, still sealed with the same 4-digit combination I used for every safe that mattered, my dad's old badge number. It clicked open. Inside, everything was in perfect order, like Cliff had ghost-written my vengeance from the grave. On top, a manila folder with a single tab, 7B. I hadn't thought about it in years. Not seriously. Cliff had only half-joked about it. He'd said, put it in the charter. No one reads the damn charter. That's the trick. Make it long enough to bore the sharks. Then bury the teeth. I pulled out the sheet. Legalese, Latin phrases, and signature blocks. But one sentence, just one, jumped out like a flare on a dark road. In the event of involuntary removal of the founder without prior shareholder vote and dual audit confirmation, all operational control and ownership rights revert to the founder trustee until legal resolution. She never triggered a vote, never ordered an audit. Hell, I doubt she even read the original documents. She just sat there with her arms crossed and her family flanking her like some throne room coup. But she didn't know the laws of the kingdom. The clause was written back in the 90s when I'd taken on a silent partner for the first big expansion. Cliff insisted we put in fallback measures in case investors or future board members tried to muscle me out. I argued it was overkill. He just grinned and muttered something about guillotines and pensions. Back then, Article 7B sounded like over-prepared paranoia. Now, it sounded like prophecy. I sat with it for a long time, stared into the fire. The kindling popped and hissed like it was whispering. She really did it, huh? My phone was still in my pocket, buzzing once in a while with messages I didn't bother checking. Probably her brother. Probably a smug little memo from legal, advising me to sign an NDA or disappear gracefully. Grace, huh? I sipped the scotch. Let the burn settle. Then I pulled out my old contact list, the one I kept on paper, not cloud. Near the top, Alan DeWitt. The only man left who remembered what the company looked like before we had 2 coffee machines and a PR consultant. Alan never did like her. Said she had soft teeth and a steel stomach. I didn't listen. I was in love. Or maybe just tired of doing it all alone. I tapped the number. He answered on the first ring. Didn't expect to hear from you unless something caught fire, he rasped. Still that same old voice. Half whiskey, half gravel. It did, I said. Her ambition. He was quiet. Then, she pushed you out. I nodded before realizing he couldn't see me. Just like you said she would. He sighed. You want Article 7B? I paused. Let the silence stretch, thick and final. I want it activated. Another pause. I could almost hear his grin. Quiet or loud. I stared into the fire again, the flames reflecting in the glass of the scotch bottle. My reflection didn't look angry. It looked surgical. Quiet, I said. I want the trap to close before she hears the snap. For 30 years, I'd watched the company mutate from something pure and hungry into a bloated, committee-run beast. And I allowed it. I let the meetings get longer, let the titles get fancier, let the coffee get ethically sourced and served in mugs printed with our meaningless slogans. Scaling with integrity. Legacy through logistics. Whatever that means. But I also played the long game. I didn't fight every change. Didn't block every amendment or acquisition. I let her have her HR consultants and brand whisperers. I even let them rename our flagship product, turn it from something solid and functional into a hollow buzzword with a trademark symbol. I nodded through it all because I knew something none of them ever bothered to check. Article 7B was still there. Every time we rewrote part of the charter, I'd casually say, looks good. Just leave the founder provisions as is. And no one questioned it. Not the lawyers, not the board, and certainly not her. She wasn't interested in what I'd written 3 decades ago. She was too busy giving her cousin a VP title and planning brand partnerships with whatever influencer agreed to wear a hard hat on TikTok. Cliff had made sure the clause was unreadable to anyone without a background in old-school trust law and a stomach for Latin. Even called it anti-treachery architecture. It wasn't a clause. It was a lockbox hidden inside another lockbox, written in the kind of language that made modern lawyers glaze over. And now, those safeguards were all that mattered. The clause was surgical. In the event of an involuntary removal of the founder from any role of executive authority, where such removal occurs absent, A. Formal shareholder vote with full quorum, and B. Post-removal audit by 2 independent third-party firms, all operational control and asset rights revert to the original founder trustee for a period no less than 90 days, or until said requirements are met in accordance with Corporate Law Section 12A. Translated? No vote, no audit, no power. And guess what she forgot to do? No one had called a shareholder vote. I knew that because I was still technically one of them, and I never got a notice. No one brought in outside auditors. They didn't even have the decency to fake one. They thought firing me in front of her relatives with a smug little grin was enough. Thought the optics alone would carry it. They forgot who built the paperwork. She had the board. She had the social capital. She had the family name now, sure. But I still had the skeleton key. That next morning, Alan's people filed everything. Quietly. Legally. Precisely. The registry never questioned it. They'd seen the clause before, back when we first formed the trust structure. It was listed under contingency articles. Never revoked. Never amended. Just dormant. Waiting. By lunchtime, I was officially relisted as founder trustee with reversionary control. Not CEO, not director, but something much more dangerous. The one person whose signature now blocked every operational move until the governance gap was resolved. And the gap? Oh, it was massive. They'd been so obsessed with forward momentum, they'd forgotten the engine had a dead man's switch. Legally, she hadn't taken over. She'd committed what amounted to procedural fraud, dressed up in brunch clothes and smirking lipstick. Every contract signed post-dismissal? Invalid. Every board vote called afterward? Contestable. Every dollar moved from Treasury? Now under review. But I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted to watch it unfold. Wanted to see how long it took for the new owners to realize their throne was made of cardboard and duct tape. And that realization would start, not with me, but with the man who checked the bank balances. The man who signed the payroll. The one she thought was loyal because he once hugged her at a company picnic. Her CFO. He'd be the first to crack. And when he did, he'd call her. And she'd ask the question I'd waited 30 years to hear. What the hell is Article 7B? Alan DeWitt was the kind of man who scared lawyers into double-checking their punctuation. He didn't yell. He didn't posture. He just made very calm statements, and then, 6 months later, entire departments ceased to exist. Most of our younger staff had no idea who he was. They'd heard his name once, maybe twice, usually whispered in board meetings or buried in the fine print of our earliest merger docs. To them, Alan was a ghost. To me, he was insurance. He was also the only person in 30 years who ever told me the truth without worrying how I'd take it. Like the time he walked into my office in 1999 and said, "Your fiancée, watch her. She's got ambition in her jawline and boredom in her eyes." I didn't listen then. I do now. When he picked up, there was no small talk. Just a low, raspy chuckle when I said her name. "She fired you?" he asked, voice like a gravel road under pressure. She did. He didn't ask for the why. He already knew the how. "You want Article 7B enforced?" I looked out the cabin window. Frost was creeping up the glass like the world itself was exhaling one long, cold breath. "No," I said. "I want it activated." Quietly. There was a pause. I could almost hear the creak of his leather chair, the sip of black coffee in some dim, walnut-paneled study 1,000 miles away. "All right," he said. "We'll start with a sealed filing. My people will handle it. She won't even know it happened until she tries to move money." Alan wasn't just a silent partner. He was the architect behind the trust structure that held our founding equity. Back then, we designed it to be fireproof. What we didn't say out loud was that we'd also made it sabotage-resistant. He'd insisted on building traps for greed, fail-safes for betrayal. And I, the idealistic builder, thought we'd never need them. He was about to prove me wrong in the most satisfying way possible. The next morning, at 4:43 a.m. local time, Alan's legal team, 3 suits so pale they looked embalmed, filed a motion with the state corporate registry under our original holding trust, Franmar Systems, LLC, Clause Enforcement Subsection 7B. It was filed as a sealed governance concern, which meant no notifications would be sent until internal review was completed. In the meantime, trustee authority was formally reactivated. That meant me. It also triggered a subtle chain of automated alerts, flagged transactions, frozen privileges, and most importantly, a legal red light on any executive signatures submitted after my dismissal date. None of this would make headlines. Not yet. But in the back-end systems of our company's operational framework, red flags began quietly stacking like dominoes. By 7:15 a.m., Treasury's internal ledger locked out access to discretionary funds. By 8:03, an auto-prompt denied HR's attempt to onboard her nephew into a new chief strategy role. And at precisely 9:17 a.m., her CFO, Mark Linwood, Harvard MBA, loyalty bot with a corner office and a ridiculous espresso budget, called her in a panic. She answered on speaker. "Ma'am, I think he just invoked something." Silence. Then his voice, cracking slightly. He invoked Article 7B. And there it was. The first tremor. The first stone in the avalanche. On the other end of the call, She didn't speak. I know her well enough to picture the scene, standing at her desk, frozen, eyes scanning the room like someone had just told her the floor might collapse. Because it would. Slowly, precisely, legally. She'd smirked when she handed me that letter. But now the smirk would twitch. Because she knew the name. She'd heard Cliff mention it once, years ago, in a meeting she never paid attention to. She'd laughed it off. Sounds dramatic, she'd said. And Cliff, God rest him, just winked at me and said, dramatic's only a problem when it's on stage. In business, it's a scalpel. I poured myself a second scotch, stared at the flames again, let the weight of the moment settle into my bones. One sentence from me, one call, and now her empire had a hairline fracture. She just hadn't noticed how wide it was getting. Yet, at 4:43 a.m., while the city was still dark and quiet, a single digital filing changed the trajectory of a $600 million company. The motion was submitted through a secure legal channel, quiet, encrypted, and flagged as Founder Trustee Clause Activation. Alan's team had been preparing it for years, even if we hadn't spoken about it since the early 2000s. Every dotted line had been waiting. Every seal, notarization, contingency, all loaded like a round in the chamber, just waiting for the trigger. By the time the sun broke over the skyline, the foundation of her authority had already begun to buckle. Article 7b was not some sentimental relic. It was a legal guillotine dressed as footnote. The trustee registrar was the first to change. Legally, they had to update the primary control party on all governance documents. So, as of 5:12 a.m., all executive actions required dual signatures, hers and mine. Except mine was now listed first. At 5:28, Treasury controls updated. The authorization threshold for transactions over $10,000 reverted to original trustee oversight, per founding documentation. That was me. At 6:04, the ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, system pinged a warning during automated payroll distribution. It flagged that post-removal payments had not been reviewed by the trustee, and then froze batch processing. She wouldn't know yet. At 6:41, Alan sent one email, one sentence, directly to her CFO. Review Article 7b. Immediately. No greeting. No subject line fluff. Just that. Then Alan turned off his phone. Linwood, the CFO, didn't move right away. He'd seen Alan's name maybe twice in his life. Thought he was some legacy investor with a morbidly expensive attorney fetish. But when he ran a query into our foundational charter system, the original encrypted archive stored off cloud, his cursor froze on one blinking entry. Clause 7b. Status, active. Trustee, redacted until internal review complete. He read it again, and again, then opened the PDF. I imagine his face went pale around paragraph 4. That's where it became clear. Any executive action following a non-compliant removal of the founder was considered ultra vires, beyond legal authority. Meaning, nothing she signed, authorized, or ordered since handing me that letter held weight. The realization hit him hard. It wasn't just a legal technicality. It was a rollback grenade. He didn't call his assistant. Didn't try to loop in compliance. He called her directly, and she picked up mid-laugh, probably sipping her oat milk cordidu with that smug little sense of victory still fresh on her tongue. Mark, she said, can this wait? I've got a... No, he interrupted. It can't. That silenced her. He took a breath, then said it, voice shaking just enough to betray everything. He just invoked it. Pause. She didn't speak. I wasn't there, but I know that silence. I've seen her deploy it like a weapon, like a scalpel, like a pause that could unnerve senators. But this time, the silence wasn't calculated. It was confusion, doubt, cracks in the mirror. Then finally, what exactly is Article 7b? She said it like someone trying to recall if they left the oven on. Like she'd heard the phrase before, but never bothered to ask what it meant. And that was the problem. She never asked. She never read the old documents. She skimmed, delegated, assumed, like the entire empire was a wedding gift she could redecorate. Mark didn't answer, because he was still reading. And the further he read, the worse it got. By 9:34 a.m., Treasury had locked her out of discretionary funds. At 9:41, the registrar sent a passive notification to the board alias, Governance Structure Update filed under Clause 7b. No action required during preliminary review. No action required. That's what made it devastating. Because by the time she understood what Article 7b was, it had already made her power ceremonial. Like a queen whose army had quietly defected. She could still walk the halls, still hold meetings, But every stroke of her pen now sat under a shadow she couldn't erase. And that shadow? It looked a lot like me. The emergency legal meeting was called for 10:15 a.m., but by the time they found an available room and scrambled the key players, it was pushing 11. She hadn't even touched her croissant. That alone was a sign things were unraveling. The in-house lawyer, Barrett, former litigator, now full-time fire extinguisher, arrived red-faced, tie askew, clutching a printed copy of the founding charter like it was a radiation leak. He didn't sit, just stood at the head of the table, flipped to a dog-eared tab, and exhaled like a man who'd just confirmed the worst. This clause was never revoked. He said it slowly, like he couldn't believe it himself. She leaned forward. Barrett, what the hell does that mean? CFO Linwood chimed in, still pale. It means the registrar has already accepted the trustee reclassification. Everything filed after Friday is in limbo. Barrett nodded grimly. Technically, it means he's back in control until we can validate his removal. She blinked. Validate. We held a board meeting. I gave him the dismissal letter in front of everyone. Barrett tilted his head. But there was no shareholder vote, no quorum, and definitely no independent audit. That's procedural nonsense. It's foundational nonsense, he shot back. You don't get to restructure the spine of a corporation without checking the vertebrae. You just snapped the neck of your own authority. She slammed her hand on the table. Can we reverse it? There was a pause. A long one. Then Barrett, adjusting his glasses, spoke the line that shifted the air in the room. No, not without a full board vote and 2 independent audit confirmations. Her throat went dry. How long would that take? Linwood flipped through his calendar, face sinking. David's on a cruise. No cell reception until Thursday. Barrett added, and Angela resigned Friday, which leaves us below quorum. And the audits? He shook his head. You'd need 2 firms willing to jump into a legal governance dispute on 24 hours' notice. Not going to happen. She pushed back from the table and stood, pacing. So let me get this straight. A buried clause none of us even remembered has now frozen our treasury, invalidated half our executive actions, and blocked my authority as CEO? Barrett didn't blink. Correct. And all of this is legal? Barrett opened the folder wider, tapped the signature line. Her name was there. From 17 years ago. Next to mine. You signed it, he said. Her hands clenched into fists. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector fan that no one had bothered to turn off. On the wall, someone had left the agenda for next week's expansion meeting up, strategic control beyond founders, rebranding and power transfer. The irony hung in the air like a bad smell. I don't believe this, she muttered. It doesn't matter what you believe, Barrett said. It's been activated. You walked straight into a clause you never read. Linwood cleared his throat. He outmaneuvered us. She turned to him, face red, voice rising. No, you let this happen. You were supposed to review the charter before I made the move. He raised both palms. I did. But not the original filings. Those were in the secondary archive. Legal never flagged a conflict. Barrett, because no one thought to look. It was buried. Her breath came in shallow bursts now. Her control wasn't just threatened. It was compromised, cordoned off behind legal tape and reactivation protocols. We need to issue a statement, she barked. Barrett raised a brow. Saying what? That you triggered a dormant clause and are now under legal review? That'll tank investor confidence. She looked at the door. For a second, I think she considered walking out and pretending it wasn't real. But it was. And the walls were closing in. All because she wanted me gone and didn't bother to check whether the door locked from the other side. It did. 3 days. That's how long it took before the building started to feel like a stranded ship, systems offline, crew in panic, the captain shouting into a dead radio. At 9:02 a.m. on the 3rd day, an official letterhead from the trustees firm hit the inboxes of all senior staff. Effective immediately, all executive decisions are suspended pending the resolution of current governance discrepancies as outlined in Article 7b. This includes, but is not limited to, hiring, termination, expenditure approvals, vendor agreements, product launches, and media communications. The fallout was instant. Procurement froze. Payroll paused mid-process. Vendor contracts hit automatic review flags, triggering panic calls from suppliers who wanted answers, fast. Product teams were locked out of cloud access, flagged as non-compliant under updated authorization protocols. And the board? Still gridlocked. Angela's resignation hadn't been rescinded. David, still somewhere in the Aegean, was blissfully unreachable and posting pictures of sunlit seafood platters with hashtags like #BlessedLife. completely unaware that the company was unraveling faster than a loose thread in a cheap tie. She tried to fake calm during the emergency exec meeting, but it wasn't working. Her voice had the hard edge of someone used to getting her way, until now. "Let's call a vote," she said flatly. Barrett shook his head. "Still no quorum." "Then get someone to proxy in." "Against protocol," he replied. "Article 7B doesn't permit proxies during governance freezes. Everything must be live and certified." She snapped her pen in half. Didn't even notice. Linwood, watching from the corner, had stopped making eye contact altogether. And then, just before 10 a.m., he walked in. No badge, no assistant, no appointment, no announcement, just a black coat, quiet shoes, and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing the other side is already lost. I stepped through the lobby, past the new reception desk she'd ordered with company funds and gold trim. The receptionist, young, fresh out of college, clearly terrified, watched me like I was a ghost. And maybe I was. I made no scene, no speech, just took the elevator up like it was still mine. When I walked into the exec suite, the room froze. She looked up from the table, blood draining from her face, trying to square the man in the doorway with the one she'd smugly dismissed days earlier. "You can't be here," she hissed. "You're trespassing." I didn't react. Just walked to her end of the table, pulled a sealed envelope from my coat pocket, and set it gently in front of her. "This isn't a visit," I said. "It's an observation." She didn't touch the envelope. "You have no authority here." I smiled. "Cold. Brief. That's what the letter's about. From the trustee. You'll want to read it before the 2 p.m. call." Barrett reached for it, but I placed a single finger on the flap. For her eyes only. She stared at it like it might explode. I turned and walked out. No parting shot. No dramatic exit line. Just the soft click of the door behind me and the silence that always follows a shift in gravity. Back in the elevator, I didn't press a button. I let it sit there on the 18th floor for a moment, letting the tension stew in the wiring of the building, in the quiet horror blooming behind those soundproof walls. Because she knew. She knew that envelope didn't just contain legal updates. It contained her expiration date, and the timestamp was 2 p.m. At precisely 2 p.m., the conference room went still. Not quiet, still. You know the difference. Quiet is the absence of noise. Stillness is when everyone knows something's about to shift, and no one wants to breathe wrong and set it off early. She sat at the head of the table, back ramrod straight, arms crossed like a general awaiting surrender terms. Her lip had that slight twitch again, the one that only showed up when she felt outflanked. The sealed envelope lay unopened beside her keyboard, and she hadn't spoken more than 3 words since I left it that morning. A large monitor faced the room, muted blue light casting long reflections across the table. One by one, names joined the video call. Alan appeared first. No background blur. Just a dark-paneled office and a clock ticking somewhere off-screen. "Afternoon," he said with no warmth. Then came the registrar's office. 2 officials with government-issued poker faces and clipboards that looked like they hadn't seen the outside of a briefcase in years. Linwood, the CFO, sat off-center, already sweating through his shirt. Barrett hovered near the far end. Pages of documentation fanned out in front of him, half redacted, all of it marked Governance Enforcement, Foundational Article 7B. Then came the rest of the board, what was left of it. 3 faces, 2 in suits, 1 clearly on a beach somewhere. The 4th empty square, Angela's, was grayed out with a line through it. Resigned. Officially. The meeting opened with formalities, though no one cared. Then Alan cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and cut through it all. "We'll be brief. Per Article 7B of the Founding Charter, which remains active and legally binding, operational authority reverts to the original trustee in the event of an unvalidated founder removal." He paused. "Until such time that a full shareholder vote and dual independent audits confirm a new governance structure, all executive decisions made post-removal are unauthorized." The words didn't echo, they landed. Like weights. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. One board member leaned toward the mic. "Sorry, what does that mean in practice?" Registrar Official Number 1 spoke for the first time, reading from a page. "It means any contracts, payments, or structural decisions made after the trustee's unlawful removal will not be recognized under corporate registry compliance. This includes licensing agreements, terminations, equity distributions, and executive appointments." The CFO, already pale, looked like someone had just unplugged him. "Wait, licensing?" he said. "That includes our new federal contract?" Alan nodded once. "Correct." She finally spoke, voice sharp. That contract was signed and submitted. It's done. Registrar Official Number 2 looked up from her tablet. Filed yes, but flagged as pending authorization under contested governance. The counterparty has already been notified. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair so tight, her knuckles went white. You notified the client? She asked, disbelief cracking into panic. Alan leaned in slightly. They're very interested in understanding why the signature on their document might be invalid, especially for something with a $68 million liability clause. Silence. Real silence this time. One board member cleared his throat and muttered, Christ. Barrett looked up slowly. If the licensing deal collapses, it triggers default clauses on our supply chain contracts. Linwood added, almost whispering, and breaches the conditions on our bridge loan. Her eyes darted to the unopened envelope on the table. For a second, it looked like she might rip it open in front of everyone, as if some last-minute miracle clause might leap out and save her. But she didn't move. Alan spoke again, voice lower now. Surgical. This isn't personal. It's structural. Foundational. You didn't do your homework. You skipped steps. You assumed no one would notice. Registrar Official Number 1 added, flatly, we noticed. The call ended with no formal adjournment. Just one by one, the tiles disappeared from the screen until only Alan remained. He looked at her through the screen like a man examining a cracked engine he once helped design. You made a good show of throwing him out, he said. But you forgot the locks were on the inside. Click. Gone. The screen went black. She sat there, staring at her reflection. Not CEO, not visionary, not even a decision maker. Just a woman who thought the throne couldn't be pulled out from under her until it vanished beneath her feet. It started with quiet withdrawals. One vendor paused shipment, pending documentation review. Another froze logistics support due to uncertainties in chain-of-command protocols. By Thursday, 5 of our key service partners had pulled out entirely, everyone citing unresolved governance conflicts. They didn't even argue, just gone. Then the investors started circling. Not calling, circling. They didn't care about the drama. They cared about exposure, risk, liquidity. We had a pre-seed round scheduled with 2 major players, both of whom had expressed strong interest just the week before. Now, silence. Then, finally, one email. Our firm does not engage in capital discussions during periods of executive instability. Please contact us when your leadership has been formally certified by audit. She tried to issue a press statement to calm the waters. Something about proactive restructuring and legacy transitions. But legal blocked it. Barrett, now visibly exhausted, leaned across her desk and said flatly, you released that, and it's discovery bait. They'll subpoena everything. The media didn't wait. An industry blog posted a headline. Founder fired, but trustee returns? Governance meltdown at FreightSphere Incorporated. From there it snowballed. Speculation, anonymous quotes, even a leaked Slack message from someone in HR that read, we have no idea who's in charge. She tried to maintain order, held a stand-up meeting that Monday, where she addressed the staff like nothing was wrong. But you could see it in her posture, tight, defensive, like the floor might shift any second, which it already had. By Tuesday, Barrett had submitted his resignation. I advised you not to do this, he said simply. And now I can't represent a client who won't listen. 2 board members followed. One cited fiduciary misalignment. The other didn't even bother with a reason. Just sent a courier with a manila envelope and vanished. And that night, late, after the building emptied out and the cleaning crew had gone home, she sat alone. Same office, same room, same chair from which she'd once handed me my walking papers. But now the lights were dim, the windows were dark, and her reflection in the glass looked older, smaller, not defeated exactly, but diminished, like the costume of authority no longer fit. A knock. Linwood stepped in without waiting for permission. He looked like hell. Jacket off, shirt wrinkled, tie hanging loose around his neck. I thought you'd left, she said without looking at him. He didn't answer, just crossed the room slowly and set a thick folder on her desk. Not a manila one. Black leatherette. Heavy. Branded with our original founding seal embossed on the front. The one she had once called dated and wanted to replace with something modern. I finally read the whole clause, he said, voice low. She looked up, startled. What clause? He tapped the cover. 7B. Silence. Then he leaned in just enough to make the words hit like a verdict. You never had control, ma'am. He waited a beat. Not for effect. For truth. You had temporary access. He didn't wait for her reaction. He just turned and left. She stared at the folder. For a long time, she didn't move. The air conditioner clicked on with a mechanical wheeze, followed by silence. She opened it. Inside were two things: a printout of Article 7B, highlighted, annotated, time-stamped with every legal validation Alan's team had unearthed, and beneath it, a copy of the trust signature page. Hers. Mine. Alan's. Dated, sealed, notarized. Ironclad. For the first time, she understood the truth. She hadn't overthrown me. She'd wandered into a trap designed for exactly this scenario. And worse, it had been there all along, in plain sight, waiting for her arrogance to spring it. The wheel had never left my hands. She just mistook her seat next to it as ownership. Now, the wheel had turned, and she was no longer on the map. The ballroom was gold-lit, polished, and buzzing with tension disguised as civility. The annual Founders Gala was originally her idea, a way to showcase legacy and vision, to parade the future in front of investors with foie gras and overpriced champagne. She'd renamed it last year to the Next Horizon Gala, a subtle swipe at the company's roots, designed to quietly phase me out of the brand story. This year, they'd quietly reverted the name. Just the Founders Gala. No Next. No Horizon. The room smelled of roses and silk tension. Executives in rented tuxes smiled too wide. Every conversation hummed with subtext. No one mentioned the article. No one had to. Everyone there knew. She stood near the back of the room, near the ice sculpture, half-drained glass of something sparkling in her hand, posture brittle. Her dress, deep burgundy, sharp-lined, perfect. But her face betrayed the weight of 6 weeks of controlled collapse. The kind that happens behind closed doors, one signature at a time. She hadn't been removed. That was the cruel genius of it all. No headlines screamed of firings or arrests. There was no messy scandal to feed the press. Just a quiet shift. A governance correction. Trusteeship reinstated. Voting rights realigned. Founding provisions reaffirmed. By the time she realized the full extent of the reversion, it was already codified, signed, and filed. The licensing deals had been renegotiated, this time with my signature. The investors had returned, not to her, but to the original framework. The company hadn't lost value. It had simply reverted. To me. I walked into the ballroom alone. Black suit. No entourage. No speech planned. No seat at the front. I wasn't here as CEO. I wasn't even here as trustee. I was here as the man who remembered where the walls began. And that was enough. The whispering started before I hit the second set of steps. Some looked relieved. Others didn't dare meet my eyes. A few nodded, tight-lipped, silently acknowledging what they'd denied for years. I hadn't been defeated. I'd just stepped back long enough for the structure to creak. And when it creaked, I let gravity do the rest. Near the stage, an older partner from our first shipping deal raised his glass as I passed. "Hell of a quarter," he muttered. I just nodded. The band played something soft, expensive, and meaningless. I spotted her near the bar. Alone. Pale. Her hair was perfect, but her stance gave her away. Too still, too stiff. Like someone bracing for impact even after the wave has already hit. She saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine like they were trying to solve a riddle too late in the exam. She didn't smile. Didn't blink. Didn't move. And then her lawyer, some overly polished man who joined 2 years ago when she started taking meetings without me, approached from the side, flustered, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Sir," he stammered. I need to ask, was this your plan all along?" I looked at him. Not with anger. Not with smugness. Just the kind of quiet clarity that comes when you've lived long enough to outlast betrayal. I raised my glass. Simple scotch. Neat. I just built it right the first time. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Across the room, the press snapped photos of nothing in particular. Fund managers, new division heads, people who thought they mattered. None of them really did. The real shift had already happened. Not in that room. But 6 weeks ago, in a briefcase under the floorboards, in a clause no one read, in a call that changed the orbit of an empire. As I turned to leave, someone from the board called out my name. I didn't stop. I made my point. She watched me go, face unreadable. But I knew what she saw. Not revenge. Not gloating. Just the one thing she never thought she'd face. A man who didn't have to fight to win. He just had to wait. Because she didn't take the company from me. She borrowed it. And the lease had quietly expired.